In these last 12 months, we have sustained one of the largest pro-Palestine movements in the world, with hundreds of thousands turning out almost weekly to pile pressure on those in power, to call for a ceasefire, for an end to arms to Israel, and to defend the Palestinians' right to exist and resist. But in these last few weeks, as Israel's terror has escalated, it has bombed Lebanon, Yemen, Syria, the West Bank and Gaza. Only tonight, Netanyahu has briefed the media about his plans to attack Iran as US troops arrive in Israel. Our own government responds with the same self-defense chorus, with no condemnation, no serious embargo, and no moves to cut off Israel's military supply. I know that the guests that I'm joined by tonight will contribute different perspectives on where we are and where we go from here as we continue our opposition to British support for Israel, the wider threat of war, and support for a free and liberated Palestine. I'd like first of all to welcome, from the only media organisation dedicated to investigating British militarism and foreign policy, which has been a reliable source of information on Britain's role in Israel's genocidal war, co-founder and head of investigations at Declassified, please welcome Matt Kennard.
Thanks a lot, everyone, and thank you, Stop the War. I have to say, during the genocide, but also before that, from the time of the war in Iraq, this has been one of the most important institutions in British society, and as we all know, has come under a lot of flack because it is having an impact. And you know, the marches, a lot of them are organised by Stop the War, so thank you very much. And it's an honour to be here. I mean, it's hard to know what to say these days. I mean, I know it's a cliche now, but words don't feel sufficient for what we're seeing every day when we open our phones in the morning. Just more mutilated kids, more kids with their heads blown off, all supported by our government. And I think because of the work I've done and what we do, my day job, is probably what I should cover is our role as Britain in this genocide, because I think we need to change the language about our role, because you often see even activists or opposers of the genocide say we're complicit in the genocide. And that's not accurate. We are participants in the genocide. This is a tripartite genocide in Gaza. It's the US, it's Britain, and it's Israel, and also Germany, but not as active as the British. And if people don't really understand that, because the focus is mainly on weapons and arms. If you look at a breakdown of where Israel gets its weapons from, it's 60 to 70% from the US, 20 to 30 from Germany, and then the rest of the countries around 10%. Britain is not a major arms exporter, but what we do and what we provide, and maybe what we lead in, is intelligence and logistics. And this is not covered by, well, nothing to do with the reality of our role is covered in the mainstream media, but this is not well known about at all, even amongst activist communities. We sent a spy squad to Israel at the start of the genocide. This was revealed in the New York Times about 3 or 4 months ago. Not one UK newspaper has ever written about it. We send daily spy flights over Gaza and give that information to Israel. In fact, I've been looking recently at the flights that are going, and it's often 2 flights a day now, and they're in the air for 6 hours. So often we're collecting 12 hours of intelligence from Gaza and giving it to the Israelis. We don't know, and we've asked, we don't know where that intelligence is going, what departments, and we don't know what the Israelis are doing with it. The British government say, well, it's all to do with hostage rescue. But then I think that's a semantic wordplay, you know. Firstly, we only had 2 hostages in Gaza when the spy flight started in December. One of those has now been killed, it looks likely by the Israelis themselves. So it doesn't explain 1,500 or maybe up to 2,000 hours of footage now just for this one hostage. So what I think it is the British say it's hostage rescue because the whole operation, the Israelis say, is about hostage rescue. And what I imagine they're doing is providing intelligence to help the Israelis in their operations. And in fact, the plane that goes, which is called the Shadow R1 plane, one of its capabilities is target acquisition. And those planes come from a base we have in Cyprus called RAF Akrotiri. which is again, this is a story that's not well known about, but when Cyprus got independence from Britain in 1960, we retained 3% of Cyprus. There's bases on them, but they're vast areas, and people actually live on them as well. I've been to them. And RAF Akrotiri has become the logistics hub for getting weapons, for getting personnel, for spies to Israel and special forces, US special forces. And this is, again, a role that no one talks about, but we have to talk about, because Britain is the leader in supporting the genocide through logistics intelligence. So our government is a participant in the genocide, and the ministers responsible should be hauled before the ICC, along with Netanyahu, Gallant, and the rest of that gang. But the people who are complicit are the media. The media are complicit, number one, because they regurgitate Israeli propaganda daily, and number two, because they do not, they omit any information that the population would need to understand what our role in the genocide is. We at Declassified have done dozens of stories now about that base in Cyprus, about the spy squad, about the daily spy flights. Not one of those revelations has ever been in the mainstream media, including The Guardian. And even though we're small, we're like 4 people, our stories have created an outrage in Cyprus. There's been demonstrations there. Both presidents on both sides of the border have had to comment. And it shows. Can you imagine if the resources of the BBC or The Guardian were used to actually expose our role? They'd have to ground those planes within a week. So we need to view our journalists, well, we need to view them not as journalists, they're stenographers for power, and they're complicit in the genocide because they're not telling us our government's role, and we can't bring it to an end. And I'll finish with this, I've only got 5 minutes, right? Yeah. Which is a point, not about the British role, just about this issue in general. It's hard not to feel helpless and just consumed with pain when we're seeing what we're seeing, but I do feel there are a lot of reasons for hope, and I'll go through some of them. Mainly, I think that in my lifetime, and I don't know, some of the older generations could say if they agree with it in terms of what they've seen in the past, but I feel like the population here in the United States and around the world is more awake than it's ever been. I went to the encampment, there's an encampment outside the US Embassy, and a woman came up to me and said, I've never been involved in politics, and now literally my whole life is politics in Palestine, solidarity work. She was living in a tent on the encampment, and she said, and I was talking to her, and she said, I know lots of people like me, and I meet people like that a lot, and that is a reason for hope, because the mask has fallen off the empire. And when I say the empire, I mean the American empire, of which Britain is an adjunct. And that is the main enemy we have as a species. It's impossible for us to make progress as a species when we have this rampant, rapacious empire centered in Washington, DC, and also London, which smashes hope and supports genocide and supports the annihilation of people all over the world. So we need to, as activists, crystallize that awakening, use that awakening to push on and obviously stop the genocide as the priority, but move on to stopping this rampant empire destroying so much of our world.
Thanks a lot for that, Matt, and thanks for all the work that you guys do at Declassified and exposing what you say is the mainstream media just refuses to cover. Our next speaker is president of Britain's largest union and has been a real driving force behind the union's advocacy for the Palestinian people, but also its support for the BDS movement. I do want to say also, showed a very impressive mobilisation recently in our Workplace Day of Action, with activists from Unison all across the country walking out, holding meetings, doing speeches and all sorts of things in support of the call for a ceasefire. So thank you for all your support. Steve, President of Unison.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for inviting me to speak at this really important meeting tonight. So, as has been said, I'm Steve North, I'm the President of Unison. I'm a local government worker by day. I live up in Salford in Greater Manchester. But it's a real pleasure to be able to join you in East London tonight speaking on this platform. I'm proud to be a trade unionist. I'm proud to be a socialist and I'm proud to be an internationalist. And I don't think you can be a trade unionist without being an internationalist. Our role when we are at our best as trade unions extends well beyond the workplace. We fight within the workplace, absolutely. We have a responsibility to our members and to our class to do that, but our class is international, our class is global, and when we see the suffering of ordinary working class people throughout the globe to the extent that we are seeing in the Middle East at the moment, we have a duty, we have an historical responsibility to those who came before us to call it out. Trade unions have to be part of challenging what is going on in the Middle East, what is going on in Gaza, what is going on in Palestine more widely, what is now taking place within Lebanon, and what could escalate into other areas. That is our responsibility. Now, within Unison, following the events of the 7th of October and the escalation and the immediate collective punishment that began to take place, we took a very firm decision very quickly that we were not going to weaken our policies and our commitments to the people of Palestine, but if anything, we were going to strengthen them. We called for a ceasefire immediately. We rallied round within our branches. We are a large trade union, as has been said. We rallied round in our branches to raise donations through medical aid for Palestine. We called immediately for humanitarian aid. We've long had a policy of calling for the recognition of a Palestinian state, and we considered what we could do to ensure that wherever there was a demonstration, wherever there was a mobilisation, we were on the streets in support of the Palestinian people. And we've been there right from the start in doing that. But I think I also have to say that as a union that's affiliated to the Labour Party, as a union that's seen as being close to the Labour government, I think we have an additional responsibility. I often feel we're too close, actually, but those within my union who would say that we hold that position for a reason have to be able to answer the question of what we are doing about that relationship now that we have a Labour government, and a Labour government that is not nearly going far enough in support of the Palestinian people and to stop what is taking place. We have as Unison a special responsibility to be accountable for what we are doing to challenge that, because we're a democratic union. We set our policies through our conference, and our conference in June this year was very clear what our demands were in support of the Palestinian people, and I've already set them out. Our policies and our commitments don't change with the election of a new government. If anything, that creates an additional responsibility on us to do more, to work harder, to ensure that there is change. And quite frankly, at the moment, we are not seeing nearly enough from this government, and we have to continue to challenge them in every possible way that we can until they are part of the solution rather than what they are currently, which is part of the problem on this issue, a big part of the problem. You know, we as part of our policies, I have to say, we did condemn, and we do continue to condemn what happened on the 7th of October last year. But, and I'm paraphrasing other people, and I'm not quite sure who said this first, but if people take the view that nothing could justify what took place on the 7th of October, why is it that seemingly everything that Israel does since then can be found a justification? That is a perverse logic that you can, that even if you take the view, as we do as a union, that what happened on the 7th of October last year was unacceptable, how can you then take the view that the collective punishment that has been visited on the thousands, tens of thousands, over 100,000 people, millions if you actually consider the totality of what is taking place in Gaza and beyond, how that can possibly be justified against the Palestinian people? We know where we have to stand with this conflict. We know where we have to stand in terms of ensuring that this doesn't escalate further. We have a special responsibility as trade unionists to do that. We need to see more banners on the demonstrations. We need to see other unions joining in a way that they have an historical responsibility, like we within Unison do as well. We can, to go to the previous speaker, to Matt's point, we have got reasons to be optimistic. We have got more people coming into activity every day. We are recruiting members as a union every day, and one of the reasons we're doing so is that because they can see that we are active and we are challenging what is going on within the Middle East. We have a responsibility to do that. We're expected to do that by our current members, and we're expected to do that by future generations of trade union members. Not only, not even mentioning those around the world who rely on us and need us to do that in their darkest of hours. So our solidarity is there from Unison. We stand with you. We will continue to fight for an immediate and permanent ceasefire. We will continue to fight for the recognition of a Palestinian state. We will continue to fight against the escalation of war, and we will challenge anybody, including and especially the current government, to make sure that it fulfills its responsibilities in a way that at the moment it is falling woefully short. Thank you, comrades.
Thanks, Matt, and I would urge anyone else here who is a member of a trade union to please get involved in the next Workplace Day of Action. Our next speaker is a British Palestinian activist who, and I'm going to paraphrase Matt here because he summed it up so well earlier, was responsible for one of the most important and impressive moments in British election history. She caused a major shock to the system on election night by coming very close to unseating a now government minister. Please welcome the inspiring Leanne Mohamad.
Thank you. Sisters and brothers, these past few days have been some of the heaviest yet. And every time I think the horrors have reached their limits, Israel delivers another massacre more depraved than the last. And this time it was seeing my people on my screen being burnt alive as Israeli forces targeted the Al-Aqsa hospital courtyard, setting tents ablaze, burning displaced Palestinians, including patients still attached to IVs. This is the cost of impunity and unchecked genocidal massacres. And when this nightmare was imposed on us, who would have thought that a year later we would be where we are? It has been 1 year, yet it feels like a lifetime. And what is happening in Gaza today can no longer be described as genocide. It is even beyond mass extermination. It is total erasure. And we are now witnessing daily atrocities from Gaza to Lebanon to the West Bank. The situation in Lebanon right now is absolutely horrid, with my family displaced alongside 1 million others as Israel continues its systematic targeting of every facet of our Palestinian lives. We have been forced to learn and reconcile with so many uncomfortable truths this year. That Starmer was a human rights lawyer, but it seems only some people are human and only Europeans deserve rights. David Lammy made his name as a supposed anti-racist, but today does the bidding for the most vile racist apartheid state. That there is a liberal rules-based order, but it is only a stick to beat others with and to be applied selectively, hypocritical, obsolete, and brutal. And that the Western media is free to lie, deceive, and unconditionally back a genocidal regime. And that political systems in the West, both left and right, give you choice. The illusion of choice, because in reality, they work to safeguard a military-industrial complex. They are the same, Labour and Conservatives, Democrats and Republicans, two sides of the same rusty and dirty coin. Peace is nothing but a euphemism for genocide. And also, there is a hierarchy of humanity and a myth of universal human rights. That the West supposedly detests the killing of civilians unless those civilians happen to be born in Palestine or Lebanon or belong to another faith. Then they are not civilians, worthy of life. Muslim mothers don't feel pain. Muslim children aren't terrified of bombs. They don't cry like Westerners cry. And they care about international law, but will sanction anyone trying to defy their settler colonial friends and their killing machines. The ICC is toothless. It took Karim Khan, the chief prosecutor, 1 week to begin proceedings against Putin. Yet a year into the most documented genocide in history, he is still sitting on his hands. We have grown a lot this year, and we've become aware of the intrinsic inequalities of a system that hates justice and a people that love hypocrisy. Keir Starmer, David Lammy, we see through your pathetic so-called arms embargo, just enough to claim that you've responded to the legal advice, cutting out 30 of 350 weapons of war. You know that this will make no difference to the genocide, yet you believe that we will be fooled by this superficial gesture. Who do you think we are? For all your talk of compassion, your so-called progressive realism, your empty calls for a ceasefire and a two-state solution, for all the rhetoric, we all know that Israel is getting away with murder on an industrial scale. And in fact, you aid them. You provide logistical support. You provide spy planes. You arm them. You give them diplomatic cover. You are Israel, and Israel is you. Palestinian lives are an inconvenient truth for you. We don't matter. Your imperial world, for which you've compromised every value to reach the grubby offices of state, requires an Israel at the heart of the Middle East. And this world needs a Labour Party beholden to this crooked order, one that allows murder with an equitable smile, one that appoints a shameless foreign secretary who masquerades as a humanitarian. This is not a Labour Party, it's another Tory party. Always remember what they did and never forget, because this world in which we live in is not an equal one, and we can all see it. They are aiding and abetting a genocide that claim the moral high ground. This is the last stage of European settler colonialism, placing the indigenous people into concentration camps and slowly expunging them from their land. Now, in the past, we believed that if there was access to the internet and digital media in 1948, like today, Palestinians could live stream the Nakba in real time, and the international community would have intervened to prevent it. That my grandparents would not be refugees, they would still be living in their homes in Palestine. But how naive we were, because it's never been about lack of evidence. It's about the very refusal to see us Palestinians as human beings. I am the granddaughter of 1948 Nakba survivors who, among 750,000 other Palestinians, were forcibly expelled by Zionist militias, ending up as refugees in Lebanon. And like so many others, they thought it would be only a matter of days, weeks, at most months before their return. But they never returned and were permanently forced out of their homes and homeland. And now they've been displaced once again from their refugee camp in South Lebanon to seek shelter, as the impunity afforded to Israel has now emboldened its leaders to launch assaults in Lebanon, killing thousands and forcing millions there to flee their homes. So as you can see, for us Palestinians, there is no P in PTSD. And the family trauma that we have endured for decades is never ending. This is a war on all Palestinians, an entire people, an entire identity. As a British Palestinian, allow me to remind you that this aggression did not start 1 year ago, and that Britain's particular role in aiding and abetting aggression against our people stretches back over a century. Britain's policies have paved the way for the systematic oppression that persists today. Anniversary is a reminder of the devastating toll of colonialism, but also of the enduring resistance and resilience of Palestinians whose struggle for liberation will never be silenced. And so in the relentless passage of this past year, Gaza has become our teacher. Gaza matters because the callousness shown by politicians abroad reflects the callousness with which they act at home. And the lesson that we taught them during this last general election is that good people will stand up to this corrupt political class. When the slaughter of the people of Gaza started over a year ago, I vowed to myself that life would never be the same. We cannot and will not stand by whilst bombs drop on innocents. Bombs that were made here by munitions companies licensed by our government. And I realised that to stop this genocide, we needed to make the politicians listen. And on the 4th of July, I brought a senior member of Starmer's cabinet, West Reading, to within 500 votes of defeat. There are now 5 pro-Gaza independents in Parliament. There is a growing appetite to move away from this two-party system, but Starmer continues to bury his head in the sand. But we are not going away. We will no longer accept sound bites and platitudes. The power of us together has sent a message that cannot be ignored. Because Gaza has broken us all. Gaza has exposed us all. Gaza has revealed the stark realities of life. Gaza has taught the world the profound meaning of faith and resistance and awoken us all to our broken politics. And it's come to symbolise all that is horrid and distorted in this world, to an unjust order that should no longer prevail. So I'm here to tell you that we are going to change the course of history, even if they hate it. And I want to end with a message. I want to end with a message to our sisters and brothers in the United States. You are sitting in the heart of this evil empire. You have an opportunity, especially in the swing states of Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, and the like, to vote down these democratic genociders. Vote for a third party and send a firm message to Harris. She has worked hand in glove with Biden to give diplomatic cover and military aid to this terrorist enterprise. Don't let them get away with it. Don't vote Harris on November the 5th. You have it within using your gift to make the Gaza vote count. So please, for the world, use your vote wisely and don't let them scare you into rubber stamping their genocide. People told me that when I stood for Gaza that I was a dreamer, that I was wasting my time and energy. Yes, I came within 500 votes of defeating a senior government minister. If you believe in yourself, you can make change. So don't lose hope. Gaza is a seed, and its martyrs have fertilized our minds and our hearts. Let the passion for justice that burns within us all never be extinguished. Let's continue to hold the structures, the institutions, the businesses and the politicians to account. And don't accept the status quo. Instead, make this past year, however painful, a moment in our lives where we vowed to change the world and to wipe away this facade of a political establishment. We will never be silenced, and together we will see a free Palestine within our lifetimes.
Be the Member of Parliament for Ilford. Yours was a victory, and whether you like it or not, you are a political leader. And I know that's not the last election we're going to see you standing. And I think the upset that you caused that night partly exposed the fragility of the British state, but what also exposes it further is the level of repression that we have witnessed against some people attempting to fight for Palestinian liberation, fight against Britain's role in the genocide. And I want to invite a couple of speakers from the floor to give a couple of brief contributions about their own experiences of that. First of all, I'd like to introduce Max from Palestinian Action. Max.
Thank you, everybody. I don't have a lot of time, so I just want to quickly say it's a real pleasure to be here, even though it's a terrible time. There's extermination procedures in place in northern Gaza, and we're living in undemocratic times. When 72% of our country supports an arms embargo and neither party offers one, we're in some trouble. But there's a people's arms embargo that's been unfolding in this country for the last 4 years. Members of Palestinian Action have forcibly closed 3 Elbit weapons facilities. Thank you. 16 of our members I'm here tonight to tell you about are right now sitting in UK jails for trying to stop this genocide with their own hands. These are the most noble, beautiful souls you'll ever meet, and I insist to you that their incarceration is just as jarring and as much of a tragedy and an emergency as it would be if any of you were in jail right now on charges, on political charges for trying to stop the war on Palestine. This war is coming home. Teachers are missing school days, and NHS nurses are missing their shifts because they're in jail trying to stop a war on Palestine. And I just want to say that not one major Palestine group in this country has made a single mention of our political prisoners. And so I'm here tonight to ask that to change. We have many trials coming up. That 16 could balloon to 48 by the end of the year. And what we really need is for all of us in this room to internalize that these political prisoners are our prisoners, and that it is incumbent on us as a movement to bring them all home and to prevent more repression from happening in the future. Thank you very much for letting me be here.
Thank you very much, Max. I'd also like to invite the sister of a man who was arrested for being involved in Palestine activity, Shabana.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Hi. first of all, I just want to say it's absolutely stupendous to be here. It's a real honour to be part of this, and you can't compete with what they've all said. It's incredible. I'm just here today to talk about Wasim Youssef, who's my brother. You may have heard about Justice for Youssef. Okay, yeah. Thank you. So basically, I'm just reminding people that Justice for Youssef is still live, it's active, and it's ongoing. And just to give you, for those of you that aren't aware, just a quick flashback on where we were and where we are now. So on the 12th of July, Wasim, my brother, was assaulted in Whitechapel Road by the police because he was fundraising for Palestine and he had a Palestine flag on his car. He was assaulted brutally, taken to the ground, and later, after hundreds of people protest outside Bethnal Green Station, he was released without charge. Okay? However, his case is still ongoing. It hasn't been resolved, so the police insist on calling him back every month, and it's a repeated case with the police where actually they haven't charged and they've not charged. So we're kind of hanging on a bit of a thread at the moment. We're also pursuing the case with the IOPC, the Independent Office of Police Conduct, and we are complaining to them about the whole process, etc. So what I wanted to do is just cover a couple of things with you today. Police brutality, I think it's all fair to say you would have seen this across London and the country. It's been very, very heavy-handed over the last year. You've seen an increase, particularly for those people that are supporting Palestine or show a kavir, if you're wearing a Palestinian flag or any kind of protest, they are coming down heavy-handed. So I think this is an area I think we need to focus on and really champion and challenge that police behaviour and the police brutality. So it's about reforming the whole police system. How do we do that? We can only do that by campaigning and championing this cause. I think this is not going to go away. You know, what happened to my brother Wasim on the 12th of July, it was awful, it was disgusting. That behaviour was disgusting, the way that he was attacked and assaulted on the floor. I will never forget that day. I will never forget the fact that my mother saw that video, broke down. It was an awful, awful day for us. But the reality is that we have to stand together. And I would request today that anybody that hasn't signed his petition, please could you sign it? We're nearly at 35,000 on the petition. Thank you. We are looking to hand that petition in on Friday to City Hall and to New Scotland Yard. So if you can get your signatures on there, I'd be really, really grateful. We are also at nearly 4 million hits on YouTube for the social media video that was put out. So that's incredible. So we just need your support on this, and please, you know, keep championing this. Thank you.
Thanks, Shabana. Thanks both of you for being here and for sharing that with us. I've got a couple of quick announcements before I return to the panel. We are raising money as part of our Stop the War Winter Appeal. There will be buckets on the way out as well as card machines, so please give generously if you can. All of our activity, tonight's meeting, the demonstrations that we organise and so on cost money, so if you're able to give, please do. Secondly, we are holding a convention, anti-war convention, on Saturday the 17th of November. It will be here at the atrium, but it will be starting at midday and it will last throughout the afternoon. We'll have workshops, we'll have speakers, we'll have lots of opportunity for people to get together and discuss with people from across the country about how they're going to take activity forward. So please save the date, Saturday 17th of November, and be there if you can. Now, our next speaker is from one of the organisations that co-organises the national demonstrations. Can I please welcome, but can I also give a big thanks, as she is on the way out in her role as General Secretary of the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament. She's the outgoing General Secretary, but I know that she'll be around the movement for a long time coming. Kate Hudson.
Thanks very much indeed, Shelley, and can I just start by sending solidarity greetings to all those imprisoned for their actions in support of the Palestinian people. Israel's horrendous crimes over recent days are unbearable, but still the US, the UK and others support the Israeli war machine, the genocide and the crimes against humanity. And after a year of the onslaught on Gaza, we now see Israel's war drive escalating to Syria, Yemen and to Lebanon. And this would be impossible without the backing of the United States, its money, its weapons, its disregard for international law. And as we oppose these war policies with all our might, we must also remember why the US and countries like the UK continue to support the genocidal state of Israel. And the reality is that the Middle East has long been a strategic focus for the United States, and Israel is pivotal to it trying to maintain that control. Of course, the US has had a wider network of supportive states over recent decades, like Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt. But these have now been going their own way. Notably, Saudi Arabia and Egypt have joined the BRICS economic bloc earlier this year. They've been opting for closer political, economic, and military relations with other states like Russia and China and India. So the US's mechanisms for control of the Middle East are falling away, except for Israel. The US is condoning and enabling a genocide in Gaza, the killing of thousands in Lebanon, and now the threat of war with Iran to support and maintain its chief ally in the Middle East. And there is no doubt that Iran is the next in line in this US-backed Israeli war drive. And only yesterday we heard the reports that Israel has now decided on the targets in Iran. It hasn't decided when, but it's obviously only just a matter of time. So the risks are enormous. This week, Kamala Harris described Iran as the US's greatest adversary. And it's really hard to see how that description is merited. And her statement came after Iran fired missiles at Israeli military bases, which resulted in no Israeli deaths. And most observers agreed this was a muted response to recent Israeli assassinations and provocations against Iran. Harris went on to say that what we need to do is ensure that Iran never achieves the ability to be a nuclear power. That is one of my highest priorities. Well, there's a very simple way to do that, and that's for the US to return to the Iran nuclear deal, which Trump pulled out of in 2018. And Trump said he was pulling out to stop Iran getting nuclear weapons. But it was the deal's successful implementation which had already removed any risk of that taking place. And in reality, Trump wanted an excuse to reimpose sanctions, to weaken the Iranian economy and to undermine its government. And the US has been on a mission for regime change in Iran since 1979, when the Iranian Revolution overthrew the Shah. And what was the Shah? Who was he? He was just a brutal autocratic ruler who was imposed by the US in a coup against the democratically elected Mossadegh. So with the ousting of the Shah, the region's most significant state and oil-based economy was no longer compliant with US policies, markets and demands. And so Iran has ever since been stigmatized by the West. Now you probably remember in 2002 that President Bush named it part of the axis of evil. Now Harris has elevated it to enemy number one. But it's not the business of the US to attempt regime change in any country, whether through war or political intervention. And of course it's the right of the Iranian people to change their government if they wish to do so. It's not the business of the West, who through their intervention have been responsible for the deaths of millions in the Middle East in the last 2 decades alone. Last month, the Iranian president offered to open new nuclear negotiations with the United States and its partners in return for lifting the sanctions that are devastating Iran's economy, and they're still waiting for a response. Such is the Western propaganda about Iran that many people think that Iran has nuclear weapons, but that's not the case. and that's not a fantasy of C&D, I'm relying for that information on the CIA. 2 weeks ago, the CIA director said that there is no evidence that Iran has decided to reverse its 2003 fatwa prohibiting the development of nuclear weapons. The fact is that Israel is the only nuclear weapons state in the Middle East, and if there is a danger of nuclear weapons use, then that's where it is coming from. Over the last year, we have heard Israeli politicians calling for nuclear weapons to be used. And this is where our nuclear concerns and our opposition must be focused, not on a non-existent Iranian bomb. And we must also vigorously support the renewal of the Iran nuclear deal. The US's attitude to Iran is basically to keep it down, waging economic warfare on it through sanctions to prevent it being a political or strategic counterweight to Israel and to the US's interests in the Middle East. And the risk now is that the economic and political war against Iran will become a military one. So it's the same old story of the US pursuing its interests irrespective of the human cost. So in this case, the cost of maintaining US interests in the Middle East is being inflicted on Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and now potentially Iran too. So friends, it's time to put a stop to the killing, to end the genocide, and to end for all time the West's criminal and barbaric intervention in the Middle East. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kate. I'd now like to welcome another inspiring Palestinian speaker, writer, activist, who recently wrote in a very powerful piece, "I have lived through two Nakbas, 1948 and 2023. We're very honoured to have you with us, Ghada Karmi.
Thank you very much, friends, comrades, fellow panelists. You know, I have to tell you that it really lifts my spirits every time I come to a meeting of people like you, people who care about the Palestinians and who are prepared to say that they care. You've no idea what it means to us Palestinians to see the enthusiasm, the support, the understanding of people like you. Now, I think you all know, we all know what's going on, yes? Yes. With Israel. We know that Israel believes that it has the opportunity of its life just now, because it has a pliable, obedient United States, other Western countries that support it, and it imagines that it can now put into effect all the plans that it's been dreaming about for decades, which is to create a new Middle East which is composed of weak, subservient states to the West and in which Israel is dominant. That's the new Middle East. And that is what Israel imagines is going to happen. Therefore, the idea that it can be deterred from attacking Iran is, in my view, nonsense. It cannot be deterred. It will try. It will try because, again, part of that golden opportunity is to drag in the United States to fight on its behalf and to fight the Iranians. So, obviously, this is what the plan is. The fact that Western states are in this too, this country, France, Germany, Italy, the rest, they are all on the same side, is something that we actually have to also deal with. Now, as I think in the introduction, indeed I did live through the first Nakba in 1948. I never thought that I would ever face another one, would have to live through another one. But that's what's happening now. Now, when I think sometimes when one is very, very gloomy and, you know, it's hard to keep going when you're a Palestinian, honestly, because we know that we don't have any state in the world which is prepared to protect us. We don't have that. We also don't have a single institution which supports us. What we have is the support of wonderful people like you and similar populations all over the world. That is what we have. But in terms of formal, official power, we don't have any. And it's worth remembering that. So you can't, you know, you can't help it. From time to time, this is all too much. And you feel that you cannot go on fighting. But of course, you know, we have to fight. Now, I want to just move on to the lessons of October 7th. October 7th, whether the Hamas fighters intended it or not, led to the most amazing upheaval in the world, in our understanding of politics, our understanding of the role of Western states and the role of the media in the whole thing. So all of this has become much clearer to us. But what I want to focus on is, I think, what is the most important lesson of October 7th, which is that the state of Israel must be dismantled. As you know, this state was imposed on the Palestinian people. It was invented and then imposed on the Palestinian people. And the same creators, the West, have maintained and provided protection and support for this state from the moment of its birth in 1948. However, not a single Palestinian wants their country to be taken over, first of all, by any other group of people, but secondly, by this particular group of people. Why? Because this is a state which is an apartheid, genocidal state. Nobody wants a state like that in their neighborhood. And although I know it's the usual way these things are spoken about or thought about, is that, you know, we need to see what's the next step, what about a two-state solution, how do we fit it, what about recognizing a Palestinian state? All of it, which implies the continued existence of this genocidal state, is rejected. In reality, what Israel has been doing is engaging in a war against humanity. And every individual or state or institution which supports Israel is also in the same war against humanity. So what I want to end on is to assert again that our way forward, even if we resolve the current crisis, which seems very unlikely, even if we do, any solution that maintains the existence of the State of Israel is rejected. And of course, you might ask, what about the people of Israel? What about the population? What about this? What I'm talking about is a state with a particular structure. That is what has to go. Its people, the population of Israel, have shown themselves to be also genocidal, I'm sorry to say. And it will be difficult to swallow people like this, but we have to. We have to. Between the river and the sea, there are two communities, one Palestinian Arab, the other Israeli Jewish. These two peoples have to live together, and they have to find a way in which they can live in equality and in a democratic structure which guarantees everybody's rights. That is what I look forward to. And if that happens, then it really will be the best end to this awful story that we can think of.
Thank you so much, Ghada, for joining us and for sharing those words. Thank you. Our next speaker, despite being one of the youngest members of the panel, has actually been speaking at these kind of rallies for about 15 years. He's a writer, activist, academic. Please welcome Barnaby Raine.
Friends, it is good to be here in my Jewish homeland, East London. It's an honor, as always, it's an honor to be on the Stop the War platform. No organization so consistently maligned by the British establishment, no organization so consistently right. I always say it, I think those two things might be connected. And it is a special honor, I have to tell you, to share a platform with the next MP for Ilford North, Leanne Mohamad. How fitting that at the next election, Leanne will defeat a man who votes in Parliament to arm a genocide and whose day job is tearing chunks out of our National Health Service. The struggle for life and dignity across borders is won. But I admit that I had mixed feelings about accepting this invitation, because for me, tonight is supposed to be a night of prayer. It's the first night of the Jewish festival of Sukkot. On Sukkot, we give thanks for the harvest. I can't do it this year. While in Gaza, UN experts say 96% of people face severe food insecurity. On Sukkot, to remember our ancestors who lacked stable homes. We live in fragile shelters like tents for a week. Today in Gaza, Zionists burn tents, burn the people in the tents. So it seems to me now, and I tell you, growing numbers of Jews see it too, that there is no better place to be on Sukkot than here with you, fighting for the best traditions of my people against the Zionist attempt to claim them and to desecrate them, to insist that Zionism is the project of giving up on Jewish values and joining all the barbarism of Christian civilization, Western civilization, the civilization which put Jews in gas chambers and which Netanyahu now champions. So I say with confidence, I am the descendant of the survivors of many genocides. So my people My people are the people who resist genocides, not the people who carry them out. I'm here today because I'm a Jew, but I'm also here because I'm a historian. So I think it's time for some history lessons. Every settler colonial state has ultimately said to the indigenous people, leave or die. Every settler has eventually recognized that there can be no coexistence with the people whose land you stole, the people whose homes you stole, no coexistence when those people refuse to surrender their dignity, when they clasp the keys to their stolen homes. Remember that Israel's sponsor, America, knows this better than anyone. Remember that there was in North America a 98% demographic collapse of the indigenous people when the settlers were done with their work. Killed by disease, yes, but also by many massacres. That is what settler colonialism is. And it's what is now being visited at this emergency hour on the people of Gaza. So if the problem isn't Judaism or Jewish values, it isn't just Netanyahu either. It is the logic of the settler, which is the logic of death. Either they win and destroy Palestinian life, or, as Ghada Karmi said so well, we defeat them. That's the choice. So remember that in the 1970s and 1980s, the South African settler state faced an insurrection by the indigenous South African people. They faced African states all around them who loathed their settler project of dispossession and murder, and so they escalated. And escalated, and escalated. They murdered in South Africa, and they murdered in Namibia, and they murdered in Angola, and they murdered in Mozambique. They murdered with bombs and clubs, and assassinations with letter bombs. Does that sound familiar? Well, know this. In South Africa, that crazed, expanding escalation, that spiral of increasing regional violence, where the settler felt surrounded and so all they knew how to do was lash out, in South Africa, that was their swan song. They were defeated. No law of history guaranteed their defeat, but people defeated them. And so we will see to it that apartheid Israel goes the way of apartheid South Africa, so that everyone from the river to the sea may live in freedom. Now, in Palestine, that is hard to imagine because the problem is not just the settler state. Just ask Joe Biden. He said, if Israel did not exist, we would have to invent it. That's right. Israel is not the supreme shadowy hand running the world. Israel is the branch office, the client state, the regional hitman for the most violent settler colonial and imperial civilization in the world today, the United States of America. So as they escalate, we must escalate. Honored to share the room as well with a comrade from Palestinian Action who have done such heroic work. Here in Britain, in that historic heartland of empire, in this city where just down the road from here so many massacres were planned, still are, we must understand ourselves as part of a global struggle for the survival of those that empires still burn alive in tents so that thieves may live secure in stolen homes. I worry about genocide fatigue. I worry about a sense of powerlessness, impotence, surrender. These are fatal curses. So how about this? I say this in closing. Our enemies in this place like to talk about British values. They inspect and interrogate some of us and ask whether we have integrated with their British values. Let's refuse. We don't want to integrate into a civilization. I say this as the proud descendant of migrants too. We don't want to integrate into a civilization and a state that funds the burning of children as they shelter in tents. No. No. So when they tell us about their British values, let's remind them that we, like many millions of people all over the world, have a different set of values. We have Palestinian values instead. Values of steadfastness, in the face of oppression and in the pursuit, the unending pursuit of universal human dignity. And if we fight as hard as our enemies, if we fight for our Palestinian values, for my Jewish values, as hard as they fight for their imperial and colonial and racist British values, if we refuse to surrender just as they refuse to surrender, there will come a day, we say this linking arms with people all over the world, after every empire and after every settler colony, when every checkpoint will be gone, when every siege will be forgotten, and our values, not British values, but Palestinian values, will rule the world. So don't give up.
Thank you so much, Barnaby. A beautiful contribution as ever. Thank you very much. And to round off our panel, I'd like to introduce our convener of Stop the War Coalition, Lindsey German.
Thanks very much, and we've heard so much tonight so powerfully about the horror that has been going on in Gaza and in Palestine, not just for the last year, but for the last 76 years and beyond that. And I think sometimes the horror, and people have expressed it tonight, it makes you absolutely paralysed with despair and fear and all the other things that we feel, and particularly the pictures in the last few days of people being burnt to death in tents or hospitals. Remember a year ago when we were told that the hospital that was bombed must have been from an Islamic Jihad rocket. Now they've bombed every single hospital in Gaza, and in Lebanon they've been bombing hospitals and anywhere else that they can. In Lebanon they're also bombing UN peacekeepers. I mean, you really can't make this up. They're shooting at UN peacekeepers. They're telling them to get out of the way so that Israel can conduct its war against not just Hezbollah, against the Lebanese people. Now, they obviously don't quite understand the term peacekeeper, because they're not meant to get out of the way, they're meant to try and stop any conflict between the two sides. So we have a horrific situation, a situation where it is getting much, much worse, and where the escalation that we feared for the last year is already happening and may well escalate much, much further. And we have a government which is completely involved in this whole process with Israel, which defends Israel all the time. Only yesterday, a man called Hamish Falconer, I don't know if you've heard of him, he had the great good fortune to be the son of Lord Falconer, who was one of the closest friends and flatmates of Tony Blair, supported the illegal war in Iraq and told us all it was legal. Well, Hamish has done very well for himself and is now the MP for Lincoln. I don't know what they've quite done to deserve that, but he's also straight away became the Minister for the Middle East and North Africa. And what he said yesterday, Iran seeks to escalate the incredibly dangerous situation in the Middle East. So he's imposed sanctions on various Iranian military figures. Now, you really couldn't make this kind of stuff up. Everybody can see, everybody in the world can see that what is going on is that Israel is escalating on a fantastic scale. And we've been told now for the last year that Israel is defending itself. That is one of the biggest lies that is being told. It is bombing Lebanon, it wants to bomb Iran, Syria, Yemen, the West Bank and Gaza. It is a country which it's supposedly in revenge for 1,200 people dead on October the 7th last year, has already killed not just the huge numbers in Gaza, and the figures that are given are much, much higher than the 43,000 official figures that we've seen, has already killed more than 2,000 people in Lebanon and displaced over 1 million people in Lebanon. That's already in the last month. So all the talk about them defending themselves is simply untrue. We're also told, again, if you listen to the BBC, which I know a lot of people very sensibly have given up doing because it's very bad for your health, especially early in the morning when you get overexcited about things. But every morning you hear that Hezbollah is firing rockets into Israel. You never hear that there are far more rockets being fired by Israel into Lebanon, and that has been going on for the last year. So you hear half the story. You hear that Israelis have had to move out of the north of Israel. You don't hear that, of course, Lebanese people have had to move out of the south of Lebanon. That's not, and now are forcibly being moved out by the Israeli army, which has had its own ground invasion. You also are told all the time, every time you hear a report of what Hamas says or anything to do with the health ministry or what Hezbollah says, this is always said it's a designated terrorist organisation. Now, you don't have to support Hezbollah or Hamas or everything that they do, or indeed anything that they do, to recognise that they wouldn't exist if it wasn't for an occupation that's been going on for 76 years. You wouldn't also know that every single, a number of speakers tonight have referred to, Cyprus, they were accused of terrorism in the 1950s when they wanted independence from the British Empire. Mozambique, Angola, they were accused of terrorism. Zimbabwe, South Africa, all of them, these were all people who were designated terrorist organisations and who now are not regarded in that kind of way at all. And that tells you that terrorism is an easy label to put on all these things, but it doesn't explain what is going on in the world. It doesn't explain why it wasn't begun on October the 7th, and it doesn't explain why it is that in certain circumstances people, and of course in Ireland, which is the oldest colony, was the oldest colony of Britain. It doesn't explain any of these things without looking at the wider picture and without looking at the injustice that has been created over those years as a result of oppression, colonialism, imperialism, and all the other things that we know are very, very much alive and well in the Middle East. So the amazing thing is, after all that, after the onslaught, after the bipartisan approach from both, the previous government and now this Labour government, which has been absolutely shameful, really, in its support for Israel and continues to be, it's amazing that public opinion here is so good, and it is very good. If you look at the figures that are given for people, the majority of people in this country want a ceasefire in Gaza. The majority of people in this country want us to stop arming Israel. The majority of people do not like what our government is doing over Israel. And it's very easy to see why. Whatever you might think, and a lot of people are deliberately not told all the things that you could be told about what is going on in the Middle East, but whatever they think about it, they can see when a group of people are being oppressed, and they can see who the oppressors are. And when they see the sophisticated weaponry that Israel uses time and again to target and assassinate people, to do all the things that they do, paid for by Britain, by the United States, by all their allies, then people know which side they are on. It's a very, very basic instinct, I think, for millions of people in this country and around the world to side with people that they see being treated so badly and in such a terrible way. So it's important that we understand that despite what they've managed to do, our government hasn't succeeded in winning that argument. They've been trying to criminalise us. We've heard from people tonight about the criminalisation that goes on. It goes on all the time. The hate marches. What are hate marches about? Why do they say they're hate marches? They know they're not hate marches. Anybody who goes on those marches knows they are incredibly welcoming, they are incredibly diverse, and particularly when Jewish people come on those marches, they receive a tremendous welcome. Why is that? Because it's not about hating any group of people. It is about standing in solidarity with the Palestinians, and that is what they cannot stand. So they try all the time to make out somehow we're hateful, we're terrorists, we're extremists, we don't care about human life, and we just back terrorism all the time. It is a complete lie, and it's one that we have to fight. We also have to fight for the bigger picture here. I mean, people have talked about the settler colonial situation. in Israel, the occupation in Israel, but of course it's much more than that. It is a whole, as Barnaby has said, it's a whole imperialist system rooted at its centre in the United States. Britain is has got the oldest empire, but very, very much a faded empire now, so it hangs on even more to its junior sort of mercenary role in doing anything that the Americans want it to do, providing warships, aircraft carriers in the Pacific, anything that's needed by Britain. They don't mind getting rid of the pensioners' fuel allowance, they don't mind screwing the NHS as long as they can keep Trident and as long as they can keep all the weapons that they're spending billions and billions of pounds on every year. So that imperialist system is one which isn't just about Israel, it's about the whole region, and it's about the resources, obviously mainly oil. And isn't it interesting that, they don't want Israel to bomb Iran's oil installations because that will raise the price of oil and therefore make people in America not able to fill their cars with petrol. That's the cynicism that's involved in all this sort of thing. But it isn't just about oil, it's about strategic control and interest. And they have failed in all their wars in the Middle East. They failed in Iraq. And one of the consequences of the failure in Iraq was to make Iran one of the strongest opponents to the United States in the Middle East. That is what they're now trying to deal with, and they're trying to deal with it at the expense of the Palestinians, at the expense of the Lebanese, and the expense of everybody in the Middle East if this war continues. So we have to do everything that we can to end that. I'll just try to conclude by saying, again, a number of the panelists have made the point that we shouldn't be too despondent. And I think one of the things about wars, I was sitting in my flat the other day, and I was thinking, what would I do if a targeted missile hit one of the flats just over the road or just down the road? How would you feel? I mean, and you'd have obviously a range of emotions would be going on. But one of the things they do with this is to frighten people and to make people feel it's so desperate and so difficult. And that's what wars are like. That's what they do to people. They have a terrible, terrible impact on us individually, which is why what we do collectively is so important. That is why meetings like this are so important. That is why demonstrations like the one on Saturday are so important. That is why fighting all these different fronts, the trade union work that we've done. I mean, Steve had to leave, but Unison has done a tremendous job in supporting particularly the last day of action, and also we managed to get a resolution through the TUC, which anyone who knows about the trade union movement in this country will know isn't the easiest thing to do, which actually two very good resolutions against an expansion of war and in solidarity with the Palestinians. So we are beginning to do this. We do, I mean, even Secretary of State Blinken has said, if you don't stop starving the Palestinians in the next month, in the next 30 days, we are going to cut off some of the arms. Now, none of us have got any illusions that that makes any fundamental difference, but it's a sign of how frightened they are, and they know that this is a mass solidarity movement internationally, and they know it's going to continue. So what we have done has been incredibly important here and everywhere else, and we have to continue that work. We have to do it in our trade unions, in our communities, in our mosques, in our churches, in our schools, our universities, in all of those places, is to say we are in solidarity with the Palestinians and with the Lebanese and with the Iranians, because the Iranians, well, it will be the most bloody war if that war happens, and the Iranians had their own war with Iraq when Iraq was a big friend of the United States and was backed by the United States back in the 1980s, an absolutely dreadful war, which is still very much in the national consciousness. Those things we have to oppose, and we have to stand up and fight for it. So please do everything you can. Please join Stop the War. Please donate to the appeal that we've got. Please organise meetings locally if you can. Please organise leafleting. Please be there on Saturday. But most important, let's keep campaigning. Let's keep organising until we win. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Lindsey. And can I just say again, a massive thanks to all of our speakers tonight, those from the panel, those on the floor. Thank you. think we've had some fantastic contributions. Before you all leave, I've got a few announcements. So, Saturday the 26th of October, there is a Stand Up to Racism national demonstration. We know that a massive byproduct of war is racism. Stop the War Coalition is supporting this demonstration. There's a stall at the back. On your way out, please grab some leaflets, posters, give them out to your classmates, your colleagues, your neighbours, whoever, and help spread the word for that demonstration. National Day of Action this Saturday. If you're local, there will be a London-wide demonstration meeting at 12 o'clock at Trafalgar Square, so please 2 o'clock at Trafalgar Square, thank you. So please do join the London-wide demonstration this Saturday. Again, our Stop the War appeal, there'll be buckets and card readers on the way out, so please give generously with cash or card if you are able to help us continue our work. And finally, the convention, Saturday the 17th of November, here again at the Atrium, midday start, lots of speakers, lots of workshops, lots of chance for networking. Thank you, comrades, for coming tonight, and see you on the streets very soon.